If I could tell you one thing that you just need to stop doing as a woman, this would be it.
You can tell if a woman is truly in her feminine energy based on the way that she is dressed.
Looks matter. Sit up straight. Lose that weight.
Keep your life a mystery. Don't overshare on social media.
Stop letting other people dictate your reactions, your emotions.
Say no to last-minute plans. Scarcity increases value.
If you look like you take care of yourself, you are automatically so elite.
She says no without guilt. She knows her worth without having to earn it.
Just don't allow
Take instruction and act on the instructions that you're given.
Do you know how to be a woman yet? Divine feminine energy, light feminine energy, dark feminine energy. All of this advice and coaching is trending in the form of TikToks, YouTube videos, ebooks, podcasts, and 12-step courses. What's up, bitches? I'm Fiji, like the island, like the water. I may or may not have been down a dark feminine energy path, and I work in social media and marketing. I bartend on the side, and I also do this. So divine feminine energy. Okay, let's get into it, guys. I knew it was popular. I knew it was trending. Obviously, that's why I picked this topic, but I did not know the extent to which how much of my own audience is into this stuff. And it makes sense, right? I make content predominantly for women, though people of all genders are very, very welcome here. So it kind of makes sense. Like if you're consuming my content, if you're in the space of sex, relationships, identity, you've probably come across this content as well. And I forgot to mention it in the beginning, guys, but I do post polls and questions on my Instagram story at SoWetS0Wet, and on the So Wet So Dry Instagram at So Wet So Dry, the O's are 0. So if you guys want to participate for future episodes, make sure you are following there. But we're going to start with a poll that I asked you guys. Do you believe in divine feminine energy? And 78% of you guys said yes, and 22% said no. And honestly, normally when I see this content, I want to throw up in my mouth. But not all of it is shit. Like, not all of it. I'm trying to be nice, guys, like, because I really realized in the responses to this poll, like, how many people are into it. And after researching it more, I really do get it. It strikes a nerve and some vulnerabilities in people. But I also asked you guys, what does divine feminine energy mean to you, right? Because clearly we saw from the beginning montage that it means different things to different people. So a couple of your responses say, feeling my best when I'm tapped into feminine energy. It means take ownership in every part of yourself that makes you feel womanly and empowered. Arbitrary nothingness, to be honest. Peace of mind. Divine feminine energy is healing, empowering, and ancestral to me. Being that girl and doing everything like a proper woman. It's okay. It's okay. Proper woman? What does that mean? It's okay. We're going to talk about it. Anyway, so to me, when I hear feminine energy, I immediately think of Female Energy, the song by Willow that came out in 2014. When that song came out, it stayed on my playlist like throughout the end of high school and early college years, and I return to it all the time now. Like when I'm feeling moody, when I need like an ethereal vibe, I return to that song. I just really love that song, and I feel like it came out during a time when I was transitioning from like girlhood, teenagedom to womanhood, and I was really angsty, I was depressed, I was like unsure in my identity, I had gone through some relationship things, I was thinking about the next move to college, all of that stuff, and like this song just felt applicable to like every moment when I was like lost. And I think there's something in that song that a lot of people can relate to, particularly women, right? Between the ethereal, spacey music that kind of takes you back to an ancient, more safe time on maybe another planet, and the pure angst of her lyrics, it gives a catharsis that is just so soothing. To be a girl, woman, or femme in this society is to exist in a state of contradictions, right? Especially in your youth and teenagedom when you're like entering adulthood. And Willow highlights that really well in this song. Whether it's in relationships, with family, with friends, at school, at work, at church, all of these structures, it's kind of like you're always trying to fit yourself in a box of like, should I be modest? Should I be sensual? Should I be sexual? Should I be smart? Should I be quiet? Should I be confident? Should I be humble? And Willow's song just takes you to this place of detachment and like freedom. It's like, whatever, I can't think about that right now. Like, I'm just gonna be me. I can't help how people perceive me. I can't help these societal structures or all of this contradicting advice. I'm just gonna do the next thing that I have to do. And thankfully, I am not the only one that associates the term feminine energy or female energy with Willow's song. According to Google Trends for the search term female energy, the song still comes up as the top 4 related queries, and the term actually began to rise in popularity around the release of the song until it hit peak popularity with its newfound associations in July of 2025. But if we look at the related topics for the search term female energy, succeeding is number 1. Now I'm gonna take us back to 2014, guys. Okay, in 2014, I was 16, and it was very much the girl boss era, okay? Beyonce had dropped her self-titled album, Beyonce, in 2013. It was also when Sheryl Sandberg released Lean In. That was in 2013. She was the COO of Facebook. Sophia Amoruso released her book, #Girlboss, talking about how she founded the clothing company Nasty Gal. In 2014, Whitney Wolfe Herd also left Tinder after sexual misconduct and harassment allegations and founded her own company, Bumble, the dating app we know today as the feminist dating app, where the women message first and you have your AI chatbots talk to. I don't know what's going on there. And also, Hillary Clinton announced that she was launching her 2016 campaign in 2015. So we were hopeful about maybe having a woman as a president. We had no clue just how badly that would go, though. But regardless, women's empowerment and being a boss babe dominated the cultural stage, and it took place a lot on social media. With all of these platforms gaining popularity, there was a new rise of entrepreneurship that took place on these platforms, which was of course perfect for the girl boss era. Women could actually make money by creating lifestyle content, cooking content, mommy blogger content, advice content, spirituality, mental health, etc. They could build 6-figure businesses all on social media and be their own bosses. And this was the feminist thing to do at the time. Feminism wasn't just political back then, though there were a lot of political feminist things happening. It was also very capitalistic and very trendy. I still feel like it's like that a little bit today. But in this environment, self-help content thrived, right? Women who had quote unquote made it with 6-figure businesses or climbing the corporate ladder were sharing advice to other women who wanted to be like them. And like I said, a lot of this was capitalistic, but there was also another kind of self-help feminist content that was related much more to spirituality and the mind and the body. It was all about being in touch with yourself, moving your hips, dancing, releasing your inhibitions, but also being more grounded. And this was during the time of the body positivity movement too. So we were seeing a lot of imagery of women's bodies, pussies, yonis, breasts. Women were growing out their armpit hair. It was very much a return to a natural state and celebrating women's bodies, or cis women's bodies. And witchiness, the occult, crystals, tarot cards, mediums, psychics, all of those things were trending as well because they are tools of self-discovery and essentially self-help. And a lot of the reclamation of the witch makes sense, right? Especially when we think about once it gets to 2016 and Donald Trump becomes president and all of the attacks on women's bodies, the Me Too movement. Women really identified with eras like the Salem witch trials, where women were persecuted for being quote unquote witches or like bad women, evil women, all of that stuff. So there was a reclamation of the darker, more evil quote unquote sides, because women understood that that wasn't something that was natural to their identity, being evil, being bad, being a witch or whatever. It was how they were seen in society. When I was a teenager during this like 2010s time, I remember taking my car to go to a psychic and a medium and get a tarot card reading so many times when the world just didn't make sense. I was just looking for, you know, some spiritual meeting, someone to tell me the answers to all of my problems and the society that I was trying to like cope with. And I'm still drawn to those things. I mean, a lot of my aesthetics, a lot of the stuff that I'm into is very dark feminine, as I would say. I mean, I'm not into the dark femininity culture stuff, guys. I don't really subscribe to the advice, but the imagery and everything like that. I mean, look at my nails. I have stiletto shape. They're very like witchy. I wear a lot of like dark clothes. I have a pendulum right here to my left. I have a deck of tarot cards. I check CoStar, all of that stuff. So I asked you guys if you are similar. Do you ever practice / have an interest in anything occult like tarot, witchcraft, or magic? And 81% of you guys said yes, 19% said no. So again, a lot of you guys are into this stuff, and it does connect back to that female energy song by Willow that I was talking about, that really encompasses kind of the vibe of this era, where she's talking about relating to past female deities.
I bet you have questions, like where did I come from? I know I come from that planet that hit Tiamat years ago.
Tiamat is an ancient Mesopotamian goddess of the Salt Sea. She represents chaos, the ocean, creation itself. She's often depicted as a massive dragon or serpent, which we're going to talk about serpents later, guys. And she usually takes like a watery form, which a lot of feminine energy, female goddess, deity, blah, blah, blah stuff is related to water. And I love a water goddess. I love a water nymph. If you guys follow me on TikTok, my TikTok name is Fiji the Siren. I very much identify with siren energy, which I know is a step away from dark feminine energy, mysterious, feminine, divine feminine energy. Again, it's okay to look to these sorts of things. Me personally, I never necessarily like worship these gods, goddesses, nymphs, etc., because I grew up in a lot of religion. I've mentioned it before on the podcast, but I went to Jewish preschool, 2 Catholic schools, and a Protestant church. One of my best friends growing up was Buddhist. I dated a Muslim guy. I've had a lot of religion in my life, but my initial theory with this stuff was that women were looking to certain goddesses like Aphrodite or Isis to kind of fill that gap that they have from being raised in patriarchal religions where they didn't see themselves represented. So they're kind of taking the structures of a patriarchal religion, but then employing like their own choice in goddesses and stuff like that, which I think can be a beautiful thing. So I tested this theory by asking you guys if you grew up in a patriarchal religion, and it's about what I thought. 75% of you guys said yes and 25% said no. I think a lot of people in our demographic age group, millennials, Gen Z, I'm a cusper, we're still raised with some sort of religion and probably patriarchal. And when I asked how does your gender relate to your spirituality, some listeners said witchcraft just feels right as a woman, revenge for all the ladies who were murdered. Being a woman to me is a spiritual experience in itself. I feel a strong connection to the moon and use it a lot in my spiritual practices and rituals. God is a woman and a woman is God. So again, kind of like replacing those formerly patriarchal deities and gods with a woman. And I read a book called When God Was a Woman by Merlin Stone. I keep wanting to call her Marilyn Streep, but it's Merlin Stone. And this book was published in 1976. It is a landmark feminist book for history, religion, archaeology, and it was very pivotal in rewriting cultural religious narratives of the era, and it was a big inspiration for a lot of feminists at the time. I think that kind of triggered maybe this like first wave, 60s was probably like the first, but like of women returning to their bodies, to spirituality, earthy practices, those sorts of things like in their feminism. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I was really skeptical of this book because I'm skeptical of the whole divine feminine everything. But of the 3 books that I read, I mean, one of them I knew I would hate. This one I actually loved. I really, really recommend that you guys read it. But essentially, she talks about ancient cultures and how they operated in a state of matriarchy before patriarchal invaders came and kind of destroyed this matriarchy structure that was led by women and had a lot of women goddesses. And under these matriarchies, part of the belief that women were held up so highly as divinities is because back then in ancient prehistoric times, they didn't know that sex led to pregnancy because people were just sexually more free. I mean, orgies, sexual practices were a form of worship to these deities. So it was a lot harder to trace paternity. They didn't have the sort of like marriage monogamous structure that we have now. So when a woman was pregnant and had a child, the baby would follow a matriarchal line. The baby would take the mother's last name, inherit the mother's resources. So kind of like the man, I guess, would be a little bit secondary. And I'm not going to say that this sort of culture like we should completely return to and it had no flaws, because a lot of these cultures always had like a mother-son / lover dynamic, which is a little weird and incestuous to think about, right? But she also says that generally religions follow the structure of the politics, the society, the system of power that is there, and women held that power because it was seen as like a beautiful, incredible thing that a woman could create life, hold life in her body, and give birth to life. So she held those resources. They didn't really understand how male bodies played into that role. And I am speaking about a lot of these like religions, goddesses, cultures broadly, right? Because she draws a lot of connections between certain like imagery and practices. Like the serpent was always seen as like very close to the woman, like it was seen as like godly. But the part of this book that I think she outlines so well that I really want to talk about is the turn from these women-led societies and religions to patriarchal ones. So between 3000 and 1500 BCE, the Indo-Aryan people invaded the Indus Valley and the Near Eastern regions, which were those regions that followed the matrilineal line. And the Indo-Aryan people were very warlike and patriarchal. They followed storm and sky gods. They related to like volcanoes quite a bit. So these people came over with their patriarchal warlike structures and decided to conquer the people in the Indus Valley and the Near Eastern regions. And Merlin Stone quotes Giuseppe Sormani, who says, the Aryans came into contact with a highly civilized and already ancient forms of settled society, in comparison which they were barbarians. They had long since abandoned matriarchy and had a patriarchal system as well as a patriarchal form of government. And there was another quote in the book that talked about how these societies in the Indus Valley and the Near Eastern region already had forms of writing that the Indo-Aryans kind of lacked. But of course, they came up in there to conquer and colonize. The Indo-Aryans also had a caste system. They were really into racial hierarchies, and they had lighter skin, and the people in these regions had darker skin. So of course they brought their beliefs of racism into the mix, as well as sexism, because they were trying to enforce patriarchal structures. Stone writes, the spread of Indo-Aryan culture brought with it the origins of Hindu religion and the concept of light-colored skin being perceived as better than darker skins. She also quoted Sormani, who said, the white-skinned Aryans did not wish to mingle with the dark-skinned Dravidians. The first laws were that which forbade mixed marriages between Aryans and Dravidians. She goes on to talk a little bit about one of their heroes, who speaks of his fear of undermining the, quote, very structure of society. His condemn is that he might produce, quote, lawlessness, which is then described as meaning, quote, the corruption of women, which would lead to a, quote, caste mixture. Does this sound familiar at all? Because it sounds to me a lot like Nazi Germany and what we are heading into in fascism today, right? But these northern invaders, the Indo-Aryans, came in and they were like, yeah, we're the better light-skinned white people. Men are the boss. You guys are lower than this. We're going to destroy all of your temples. We're going to take all of your resources. We're going to enforce our moral codes. And we're going to implement a caste system. So that is unfortunately what happened, but it gets worse. So Merlin Stone continues to follow history to the Levites and the Hebrew people, right? The Levites were a priestly aristocracy who reigned over the Hebrew people led by Moses under the guise of God, okay? Yahweh was God at the time, and Moses was delivered these 10 commandments, and, you know, he led the people, he parted the Red Sea or whatever. But if we really want to look at the language of these scriptures and talk about the history of what really happened, it paints quite a different picture, which is one of an exclusive deity and a male order, okay? So Stone references Deuteronomy. Not sure if I'm saying that correctly. I should know this. But 13:24, when Moses finished writing these laws in a book from beginning to end, he gave this command to the Levites: take this book of the law and put it beside the Ark of the Covenant, and the Lord your God will be witness against you. So through Moses saying that this is the law from God, they were able to kind of control these people by saying, oh, this is what God wants you to do. God wants you to give the priests, the Levites, your shekels and all of your property, and then you will have deliverance, or you will be spiritually safe, or you will be safe from being murdered or whatever. Kind of psychological manipulation, self-help tricks going on. And Merlin Stone says, the general picture rendered is not one of monastic priests or ascetic gurus. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but rather as well-clothed, well-fed, well-housed, well-transported, perfumed aristocracy who ruled with supreme authority over Hebrew people. She goes on to say, as the advocates of Yahweh destroyed the shrines of the female deity wherever they could, murdering when they could not conquer, Levite priesthood wrote the tale of creation. They announced that male supremacy was not a new idea, but in fact had been divinely decreed by the male deity at the very new dawn of existence. And then she goes on to connect this to the story of creation and original sin, right? So there's various different versions, but the predominant one is that Adam was created in paradise, the Garden of Eden, and he was lonely and sad. So God was like, oh, I'm going to give you a divine counterpart, a woman, and he created Eve from Adam's rib. So whatever, Adam is happy. He has Eve now. They're in the Garden of Eden, paradise, whatever. And then a serpent tempts Eve to eat usually it's seen as an apple, but it's often called a fig tree or a sycamore tree, to eat this fruit. And she does that, and she gets Adam to eat the fruit. And then all of a sudden we have original sin. Also, it talks about in the Bible how this is why women have pain during childbirth. Women are eternally punished, whatever. And Merlin Stone talks about this because so much of that imagery, the sycamore tree, the fig, the serpent, is from past religions and cultures in society that held up female deities, that worshipped snakes of any sort, fruit of any sort, fig trees, etc. So we can kind of think of this story a little bit different when we know how the Levites were operating with the Hebrew people and kind of like feeding them these lies about, you know, what they need to do to achieve transformation or transcendence or whatever. We can think of it similarly, especially when they're trying to coerce this group of people with past different beliefs. They're like, oh no, those aren't the right beliefs. This is the right God. And the right God told me that you need to burn all of the temples that you previously worshipped. And now woman needs to look to man for how to operate in this society because man is closest to God, and that is how we achieve deliverance or whatever. And when we think about this too, again, past societies followed a matrilineal line. The child took the mother's name, followed the mother's resources. They're patriarchal. They want to change that. How do you change that? By taking control of women, by giving women original sin, by making sure that women are only in monogamous marriages and that they maintain their virginity. So religion and myth has always been used to kind of explain what we can't explain, right? Like, there is some mysteries about the universe that can seemingly only be explained with some sort of story or spirituality. And I think that has a lot of truth. But also, judging from, what Merlin Stone reports from her research, these institutions of myth and stories and religion are also used to control and oppress groups of people and overthrow thriving societies and essentially colonize them. We really just need to consider where these things come from. So how has the divine feminine manifested today? Well, as I said, in the 2010s, women started to kind of reclaim God as a woman and spirituality in the form of goddesses. We probably all know the song A Woman is a God by Ariana Grande, which came out in 2018. And then a little bit later in 2022, one of my favorite artists, Tommy Genesis, released a song with Bia called A Woman is a God. But during this whole 2010s era, men were confused and intimidated and fearing for their lives and their jobs or whatever because they don't know how to operate not misogynistically, and they were afraid of being accused of sexual harassment. It was a weird time going on, but there were a lot of men that were for the cause, right? And Mac Miller was someone who was for the cause. He released a album called The Divine Feminine in 2016. And I'm not a big Mac Miller fan. His music is cool to me, but I'm not necessarily going to listen to it in my spare time. And I did listen to this album in full to research for this episode. And honestly, I'm very much getting performative man. Let's hear what he has to say about why he wrote this album.
It's just my perspective on love and kind of adoration towards a female, you know what I mean? That love story, and it's not there's just no negativity involved in it. There's not there's pain, but there's not like an angry breakup song or anything like that. It's just very sacred.
I'm lost. I don't know if you are, but a lot of the lyrics in this album are women are so great, I love pussy, I hope she doesn't leave me because I treat her so badly, but I'm gonna fuck her so good so she stays, which isn't exactly what women had in mind when they were talking about the divine feminine and woman is a god and whatever at the time. I mean, Ariana Grande released her song after, and we all know she dated Mac Miller, so whatever. But his album, The Divine Feminine, is actually what triggered the term to start trending. According to Google Trends, the search term divine feminine peaked in 2016 when the album was dropped. And while the search traffic seemed to drop off for that term, divine feminine energy was just beginning to take off, peaking in 2022. But let's table the divine for a second and return to its root phrase, which is feminine energy. Now remember, we already looked at female energy because of Willow's song that dropped in 2014. But if we look at feminine energy, it had just begun to rise in popularity in 2016 with its divine sister, and then it peaked in 2022. And where is the search term feminine energy trending the most? Well, of course, none other than Georgia, my home, and Utah. And if you guys don't know anything about Georgia, well, I would say that I'm from up north. I'm originally from Connecticut, and then I lived in Boston. And so moving to the South was a bit of a culture shock. And while I will say that where I live is very progressive, I live in Midtown Atlanta. Atlanta is a thriving culture of Black creatives and entrepreneurs. Midtown is super queer. There's some of the oldest gay bars in the country here. And overall, here in Atlanta, it's pretty progressive. But outside of here, which I haven't really ventured much into is very much a red state. Utah is big right now, and one of the biggest cities where feminine energy as a search term is trending is Salt Lake City, Utah, the home of the Mormons. And if you guys have been living under a rock, then you will be interested to know that Mormons are absolutely leading influencer culture with creators like Nara Smith and Ballerina Farms who are promoting trad wife lifestyles. But essentially, Mormon women have kind of always been dominating the influencer space, even back when it was just like mommy blogs, because they have very traditional patriarchal structures where the man works and the woman often stays home to raise the kids. And a lot of women that are staying home to raise the kids may get bored and they want a hobby, they want a creative pursuit, they want to do something. And so they'll turn to, you know, food blogging or mommy blogging or style blogging, self-help. If you guys watched the documentary Devil in the Family about the 8 Passengers channel and the woman who abused her kids, that they were Mormon and she had gotten into vlogging to kind of like fill that gap in her life. Like everybody needs something to do. I mean, like to be a housewife 24/7, like you need a hobby. Not that being a housewife isn't work, it's very much work, and that's why this content is also contradictory, because they're like, oh, you can lead this blissful life of just caretaking and cooking, when meanwhile they're also like filming it 24/7 and probably editing it and like running a whole team that's doing this like media production situation. So whatever. But one of the reasons that Mormon influencers have also been so successful is that the Mormon church also pays influencers to do like marketing. Who knew that they were so, you know, with the times? I guess they have really modernized. But Jordan and McKay of the Viral Virtue podcast, which is here on YouTube, talk about everything Mormon culture. They are ex-Mormons, and they had reported on the fact that it is confirmed that the Mormon church is paying influencers. And this comes from the creator by the name of @Alitza, who talked about how the Mormon church had reached out to her for an influencer brand deal. So a lot of Mormon content is propaganda, but it makes sense why the search term feminine energy would be trending in Utah particularly, right? They live under a patriarchal religious structure. So many women in that society may be seeking self-help in the form of spirituality, mental health, success, whatever, in order to, you know, make peace with their current society. In the same vein, many women are taking up the hobby or the business pursuit of influencing, and they may be providing this self-help content to other women like them. And this self-help content may be self-help to deal with kind of the pressures of a Mormon society, but also to assimilate to the pressures of a Mormon society. And the thing is, no matter what kind of self-help content you are consuming, divine femininity, coaching content, dark femininity, they all kind of lead into femininity coaching if you are a woman. But everybody consumes self-help content in some form, right? Most of us, especially if we're not in school anymore, want to continue learning and improving. And so we seek out books, podcasts, YouTube videos, TikToks, Instagram posts to improve our mental state, our fitness state, our success state, our style, our relationship, whatever, because we want to live in this constant state of improvement. We live in a optimization culture, and it just brings a sense of fulfillment. Like I always feel more fulfilled when I'm like learning something new about myself or learning some new point of view. So I asked you guys, what type of self-help content do you consume the most? And the number one was mental health and psychology at 35%. At 32%, we have fitness, style, and beauty. 23% is productivity and success, and 10% is religion and spirituality. And one listener said, modern self-care has also turned into productivity culture with the morning shed, etc. And it's like exactly like all of these things are kind of overlapping, like I said, and they are all pipelines into the divine feminine, especially if you are a woman. But with mental health being the number one, it makes sense. A lot of people are sad and angry right now, regardless of your political views. I think a lot of people feel misunderstood. A lot of people are struggling with like maintaining an aspect of like efficiency and productivity while also dealing with financial burdens, raising a family, having a relationship, going to school. People are overall having a hard time coping, so they are seeking out mental health help. And with that, I want to talk about one of the biggest influences on modern psychology, psychiatry, and overall mental health, which is Carl Jung. I read his book, Aspects of the Feminine and Aspects of the Masculine, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But first, I came across Carl Jung for the first time on Tumblr when I was probably like 13, and there would be these like quotes, you know, from Carl Jung on Tumblr that were very like, yes, like I relate to this. Like a lot of what he talks about with the shadow and your subconscious versus your conscious. And one of the biggest things that I love from Jung is synchronicity, right? So I recently just lost two people that are very close to me. One was my grandfather and one was Tracy, somebody that I worked with. Rest in peace to both of them. I love you guys so much. I know you're here with me all the time, even though I'm not a very spiritual person. I do believe in their energies being here. And synchronicity doesn't have to be with somebody that had passed away, right? But it is like when something, you see a sign and it just like clicks, like something just reminds you. So my grandpa was really, really into roller coasters, right? So imagine I'm like going about my day, or I'm having a hard day about something else, and then someone at the bar I'm bartending is like, oh yeah, I just went on this roller coaster last weekend, and we start talking about roller coasters. Like that is like a synchronicity, because I'm gonna feel like, oh, my grandpa's like with me right now. Like that is a sign that he's still here. But it doesn't always have to be, you know, related to grief and related to losing someone. It could be even something like, sometimes when I'm researching for this topic, like I'm working on the Divine Femininity episode, and then I'll like go out and meet someone who mentions that, or I'll like see it somewhere. Like, I don't know. But it's also like, are you predisposed to, you know, noticing those things more because you have it on your mind? Whatever, it can be argued. But either way, the idea of the shadow, the idea of the inner child, the idea of the mask and the ego and the persona, these are all things that are very popular in modern therapy content and modern therapy in general. Like, I've been through a lot of mental health stuff, and a lot of it is, you know, healing your inner child. Usually in a therapy format, it's a little less woo-woo than in like TikTok advice and stuff like that, but they do pull principles from Carl Jung's philosophies or studies on psychology, as well as Freud, who is really like the daddy of psychology as we see it in America today. He believes that our subconscious is driven by our libido, which is our sexual drive. But Carl Jung differs in this. He believes in a general collective consciousness kind of thing, like a psychic energy that connects us all. And he grounds this theory in myths, and how there's a lot of similar archetypes appearing in a lot of myths and religions. But regardless, he's looking at spirituality, he's looking at myth, he's looking at archetypes. And he talks about the feminine and the masculine. And a lot of his theories are very much based on the binary of the masculine and the feminine. So the archetypes that he cites throughout his work are the shadow, the wise old man, the child, the mother, the maiden, the anima, and the animus. And I just think it's interesting that for the male one, we have the wise old man, right? And the child, of course, could be male or masculine or whatever. But for women, we get the mother and the maiden. Why isn't there a father? Why isn't there a bachelor? I don't know. But to him, the anima is the subconscious idea of the woman in the man that, guys, that drives him to be gay. Like, I don't know. His work is just, the more I read it, I was like, why was I ever drawn to this? There's grains of like goodness and truth and like, yes, heal your shadow. But also, what the fuck are we talking about sometimes? And the animus in women is the masculine ideal. Like, so women's idea, everything that they have interpreted, have downloaded from this collective consciousness about men. And so he sees the anima as driving moods in men, because the anima is feminine. She drives moods in men and makes men moody. And the animus drives opinions in women, making women opinionated. And you're supposed to heal that depending on your gender. You need to heal that opposite part in order to like feel whole or whatever. So say I'm a woman and my animus, the man in my head, is too loud and making me be too opinionated and causing me to create a video essay like this. I just need to heal him so he goes away and I can be more of a feminine woman, I guess. I can't talk about some of this seriously because I'm just like reading the actual work, reading his actual words. I'm like, what the fuck are we talking about? What all of modern psychology is based on this? Like, are we fucking serious? And I am going to probably do an episode about mental health and how it has manipulated queer identities, sexuality, and women, particularly like sexuality, and break down how some of these things are rooted in homophobia, transphobia, racism, sexism, misogyny, etc. But back to Carl Jung. Okay, I'm still I see I see why women are drawn to it though, right? Because it does make sense in a lot of forms, especially when we think about, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, guys, but I think it was James Baldwin that talked about, as a black man, you always have, you know, the white man's opinions, like idea in your head. Like you're operating not just from a point of like your own body, your own experience, like humanness, but you're also operating based off of how you expect the white man to perceive you, because you're living in the society where your identity is a deficit, where you are always going to be perceived in a certain way. So you need to assimilate to this culture in order to be like respected and all of those things. And it's similar with women. Again, I forget what feminist cited this, but it's also like the man in your head, the idea of the male gaze, which we've talked about on the podcast before, right? Like we see ourselves through the eyes of a man before we see ourselves through the eyes of ourselves. I'm sure it's the same thing, you know, with queer people and trans people. Like you are seeing yourself what a cis person might think of you or see you as before you can just experience, you know, being a human and moving throughout this world, because you are not like the privileged body. So in some sense, when he talks about the anima and the animus and both a woman and a man, it kind of makes sense, right? Like we're getting close to the idea of like an opposite or an other, or being seen as other, needing to heal this like persona that you present and your like ego and all of that stuff. However, so much of it is rooted in, okay, well, let's just return to traditional gender ideals and heterosexuality. Like he is so against being homosexual, being gay, being lesbian in any way. Anyway, so why women would be drawn to this is because like we can relate to that. Like these things don't make sense. So it's like you have this idea of a man in your head, like the perfect ideal of what you're supposed to subscribe to. But instead of Jung teaching you to release that and unlearn that, he's teaching you how to ascribe to that even more. So I'm going to read some quotes from Carl Jung, and hopefully we're all going to get a little bit more skeptical of this stuff. When talking about the mother archetype, he explains some of the things that can go wrong, etc. And he says, such a mother is an anachronism, a throwback to a primitive state of matriarchy where the man leads an insipid existence as a mere procreator and serf of the soil. Interesting how it's primitive, right? Remember we had said that depending on who is retelling this history, they will bring a misogynistic lens to it and all of those things. Even though these matriarchal, matrilineal societies were before the patriarchal ones, and they had a form of writing before the patriarchal ones, they are primitive, and it's a bad thing when men don't have as many rights. But when women don't and haven't for centuries, it's totally fine. But going on, and talking about the animus, also guys, these are from like different works, because the book I have is like the collective, the aspects of the feminine and the aspects of the masculine, so it's different essays. But this one says, a woman possessed by the animus is always in danger of losing her femininity. her adapted feminine persona, just as a man in the life circumstance runs the risk of effeminacy. These psychic changes of sex are entirely due to the fact that a function which belongs inside has been turned outside. The reason for this perversion is clearly the failure to give adequate recognition to an inner world which stands autonomously opposed to the outer world and makes just as serious demands on our capacity for adaptation. So basically, if you have opinions as a woman, you need to keep them in yourself because that's your inner world, and that's not appropriate out here because this is how society functions, and men have opinions, women are quiet. So stay in your feminine because that is how society runs. He goes on to say, if the woman happens to be pretty, these animist opinions have for the man something rather touching and childlike about them, because children are attractive, which makes him adopt a benevolent, fatherly, professional manner. But if the woman does not stir his sentimental side, and competence is expected of her rather than appealing helplessness and stupidity, then her animist opinions irritate the man to death, chiefly because they are based on nothing but opinion for opinion's sake, and quote, everybody has a right to his opinions. In intellectual women, the animist encourages a critical disputatiousness and would-be highbrowism, which however consists essentially in harping on some irrelevant weak point and nonsensically making it the main one. Or a perfectly lucid discussion gets tangled up in the most maddening way through the introduction of a quite different and, if possible, perverse point of view. Without knowing it, such women are solely intent upon exasperating the man and are, in consequence, the more completely at the mercy of the animus. Quote, unfortunately, I am always right, end quote. One of these creatures confessed to me. So he clearly doesn't believe in women having opinions. So if you're healing yourself, if you're seeking mental health, and my therapist told me to not have an opinion, I think I would like lose my shit. But anyway, this next quote is from an essay called Women in Europe. And it is very much echoing what we're talking about today, right? Like women today, like OnlyFans, like women, you know, want you to pay for everything, or women want to be men, or like da-da-da. Like that's the vibe that it's giving. And this is a long quote, but it is necessary. We need to hear his words because so many people are like, I'm a Jungian femininity coach. I'm not really knowing what that means completely, or they do know what they mean that means, and it's even fucking worse. So he says, quote, it is no longer a question of a few dozen voluntary or involuntary old maids here and there, but millions. Our legislation and our social morality give no answer to this question, or can the church provide a satisfactory answer? Should we build gigantic nunneries to accommodate all these women? Or should tolerated prostitution be increased? Obviously, this is impossible since we are dealing with neither sinners nor saints, but ordinary women who cannot register their spiritual requirements with the police. There are decent women who want to marry, and if this is not possible, well, the next best thing. When it comes to the question of love, laws and institutions and ideals mean less to women than ever before. If things cannot go straight, they will have to go crooked. He goes on to say, quote, at the beginning of our era, 3/5 of the population of Italy consisted of slaves, human chattel without rights. Okay, we think we're going somewhere, right? We think we're going to be like conscious, like class conscious, like we're against slavery, like we see that this is fucked up. Almost, okay? But then he goes on to say that because every Roman was surrounded by slaves, they supposedly were, quote unquote, inflicted with their psychology, similar to today with the, quote, the European, however highly developed, cannot live with impunity among the people of Africa, but he uses the N-word, saying without their psychology getting into these European people and causing them to unnoticedly and unconsciously become an N-word. He then goes on to call the people of Africa slightly inferior, saying that there are facts to support his view. Guys, And he relates all of that to what is happening with women. Quote, whenever some social or psychological monstrosity is created, a compensation comes along in defiance of all legislation and all expectation. Something similar is happening to women in present-day Europe. Too much that is inadmissible, that has not been lived, is accumulating in the unconscious, and this is bound to have effects. Secretaries, typists, shop girls, all are agents of this process, and through a million subterranean channels creeps the influence that is undermining marriage. For the desire of all these women is not to have sexual adventures, only the stupid could believe that, but to get married. The possessors of that bliss must be ousted, not as a rule by naked force, but by that silent, obstinate desire, as we know, has magical effects, like the fixed snare of a snake that was ever the way of women. Oh my God. Again, he loves myth, so we're returning to the snake. We're returning to original sin, Garden of Eden. And these women are being poisoned by these ideas, similar to how the European people and the Roman people were poisoned by the ideas of people who were enslaved. These poisonous ideas are that maybe these structures of patriarchal societies, misogyny, racism aren't fucking working, and some people don't have rights. But that's really poisonous, right? And it's dismantling marriage. And we can't dismantle marriage because that maintains the system. If you think this sounds insane, guys, wait until we get into Julius Evola. Julius Evola wrote a book called Eros and the Mysteries of Love, the Metaphysics of Sex. And this book came up multiple times when I was researching for the last episode about eroticism and sexiness. And I almost bought the book. It has like a nice naked woman, goddess looking person on the cover. And then I started to do some research. I was like, who is this Julius Evola guy? Like, give me the background before, you know, like I didn't want to just pick up a book from any old person. Like I want to know the influences of what I'm reading. Turns out he's like a huge fucking Nazi. Like he's since deceased, thank fucking God. But he was real close with Mussolini, real fucking close with Hitler, even though Hitler kind of saw him as a little bit erratic. So what does that say about him? And he was also tried with like 32, I believe, other Nazis, but was forgiven or let go. I forget the term, but they didn't imprison him or whatever. And he was quoted in court when he was tried as saying he's not a fascist, he's a super fascist. But I just want you guys to know that when you are looking up books about eroticism, this is number 2 in the search results. So whatever, I bought it used though, guys, because I wanted to read it. I am researching to figure out where the influences of our current society are coming from. I am not worried about adopting fascist ideals because I think I'm smart enough and intellectual enough to do that. I don't really believe that if I read the work of someone else, I'm going to be like absolutely poisoned. And none of my money went to Julius Evola because it was a used book. So I read the whole fucking book and it was like batshit fucking crazy. Like I was sitting here in bed at times reading with the person that I'm dating, and I would be like literally like stopping him every 5 seconds to be like, this is fucking insane. Like he was actually getting like really like annoyed with me because like I wasn't reading. Like I just couldn't help but talk about how batshit this book is. But it is so close to Jung, and I felt the same way when I was reading a lot of Jung stuff. So but Julius Evola, I promise you, is 10 times worse. He believes sex is a metaphysical force, right? Like you have sex to transcend, but it's not, of course, about like the woman. It's about the woman like completing the man to transcend. And he believes in an absolute man and an absolute woman. And he also believes The peak society was the Aryan society, which we talked about, the Indo-Aryans who came with their patriarchal structure and instituted the caste system. So he very much believes in hierarchies and caste systems. And this book is all fucking over the place. He draws influences from Eastern religions. He talks a lot about the yin and yang, the balancing of masculine and feminine energies. He talks a lot about Kundalini energy, the snake that comes up into you and you embody that like sexual energy. He talks a lot about Tantra. He talks about the occult. He references Aleister Crowley. That's why we have to be so careful when we are turning to these spiritual beliefs or appropriating other religions, because like I know I love to meditate. Like I do believe, I think, in some form of chakras. Like I like to do chakra meditations because they help me when I have anxiety or depression, like center myself, find my center, focus on my breathing, all of that sort of stuff. Do I subscribe to those religions? Do I like claim to know them and be a like follower of them? No, because I don't completely understand them. I know that I am picking a useful tool from this, and that is not the whole of the religion, right? But Julius Evola has no problem pulling from Eastern religions, seeing what he sees fit and using it to argue for fascism. But one of the things that I found oh so fucking ironic about his book is he is obsessed, when I tell you obsessed, with the myth of the hermaphrodite. Which hermaphrodites, intersex people, are not myths or mythological creatures. They are in fact human beings, just like everybody else. They are operating in this world with us. It's not some ancient thing that, you know, whatever. But again, myths, stories, they're used to explain society. And what he takes from the hermaphrodite myth, essentially the version of the hermaphrodite myth that he is referencing is when there was an original being that was a hermaphrodite, like half male, half female, and then God or whoever the deity was punished the hermaphrodite and split them into male and female. And so male and female would constantly long for each other and always want to transcend to a state of unity, which would be hermaphroditism, when they like transcend during Eros, which is sex. But it has to be the absolute man and absolute woman and his idea and the hierarchies and blah, 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 blah. I just think it's so ironic, right? Because you're holding up this idea of the hermaphrodite as a sort of divinity, and you believe that men and women need to reach a state of transcendence through merging the aspects of the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine, in a divine way. But like we can't see how like these principles, these binaries, are like contributing to the problem. Like we can't see how like maybe the path to transcending like the problems of our culture would be to eliminate the binaries and to exist in a fluid sense of gender. But it's cherry picking from myth and projecting, which is so funny because Jung talks so much about projections, but it's projecting, right? Julius Evola is projecting his ideas of fascism onto Eros, onto love, onto eroticism, and making it super fucking misogynistic and also like transphobic and gender essentialist and whatever. And so is Jung. Like they are both doing this, and they are picking and choosing what deities and what archetypes they want to pay attention to and appropriating them. Like there are so many gender fluid deities and ancient cultures as well, like Hermaphroditus from Greek and Roman culture. And then there's also Ishtar from Mesopotamia, who was sometimes appeared as a male god, sometimes appeared as a female god. Like there are so many different representations of like something beyond just the feminine ideal or the masculine ideal, like something more fluid, something more trans, something more intersex. But they are choosing to look at things in terms of polarities, and it is very toxic, and I'm really fucking over it because the answer is right there, like it's right in front of you, but they are choosing not to pay attention to that. And it reminds me a lot of when I was a freshman in college. I studied writing, literature, and publishing, and one of my introductory literature courses, we talked about signs. And the study of signs is called semiotics, right? But essentially there is a signified, a signifier, and an interpreter. So the signifier is the sign that takes place, like the written word, for example, tree. And the signified is the actual object that that word is referencing, right? So like if I write the word tree, I am referencing a tree outside. But then there's also the interpreter, and the interpreter can interpret that word tree in various different ways, right? Like I could say he was shaped like a tree. Like I say I'm like writing poetry or something. It's like not a very good line, but like he was shaped like a tree. Okay. You could hear that. What tree did you picture? Okay. You could picture a redwood tree, like a thick trunk, tall, red colored tree. You could picture a birch tree, which is like the white wood that's like splitting a little bit. It's like thinner and they're taller. You could picture a thin, lanky man. You know, you could picture a fucking Charlie Brown little Christmas tree. You could picture a Christmas tree and you could think of like the smell of cedar and pine and whatever. You could think of so many different things when I say the word tree and when I write the word tree. It depends on your, you know, experiences, your language, how you interpret things, the rest of the words on the page, all of that stuff. But like we are always projecting something onto that signifier. So I think that's really important to think about too. And it's important to think about the way that we use language, because I think part of the reason that I've always been drawn so much to literature and dissecting like stories and culture and stuff like that is because I grew up in religion, and so much of religion is reading the Bible and interpreting it. And there are the common beliefs and interpretations of the Bible, but there's also so many various different forms. That's why we have so many different forms of Christianity, from Catholicism to Baptist to Mormonism to Protestants to Congregational to whatever. You know, there's different branches of based on how you interpret these things. So if we're talking about history and myth and stories and culture, and it's all coming from a fascist perspective, obviously they're going to project fascist ideals onto those things. If it's coming from a misogynistic person who sees matriarchy as evil, they're going to write about these matrilineal women-led societies as evil and bad. Like that's how we got here. You know, people trying to get power, get access to resources, control of the people, and project their own ideas and their own wishes and their own goals onto other people's beliefs, religions, ways of operating, all of those things. So I think it's really important whenever, and that's part of media literacy, right? Like I could watch something and take something completely different away from it than you. Like maybe you watching this are someone who is very religious and believes the book of Levites to be completely different. When you talk about the Levite people, you see this as holy. You see this as, you know, Moses got these 10 commandments, and I get that. That's how the religion was formed. But to me, when I read that story, especially now with the perspective that Merlin Stone lines up, it's like, okay, well, this just seems like an aristocracy. This seems like they are like controlling and colonizing these people and enforcing a religion that is oppressive. Two completely different ways of interpreting the same text based off of your previous experiences, previous education, who you read that's recounting it, etc. So what is the danger of modern divine femininity coaching content, etc.? Well, obviously we have the connections to fascism. For one, it's not funny. I'm laughing because this is so fucking ridiculous and it pisses me off so much. Actually, if I don't laugh, I don't know what I'll do. I feel like a crazy person, you know, especially if I just meet like another girl my age, woman. I don't know why I'm saying girl. Like we are women. We're grown. I'm 27 years old. If I meet another woman my age and I follow her on Instagram and she posts something on her Instagram story about connecting with her divine feminine energy, I'm like triggered. I'm like, like da-da-da. But it's like, I get it. I fucking get how we got here. If we're talking about the self-help industry, there's so many things that women need help with. There's so many things that people need help with. Depending on your identity, your class, where you live in America, your sexuality, you are disproportionately vulnerable to this type of content because you are told that there are things about you that you need to improve, or there really are things that you need to improve to gain financial success, to gain resources, to get out of a state of poverty or something like that, right? Like Shanspeare has a really good video about femininity coaches and how they are inherently racist. And we talked about a little bit about that with the aspects of the light and the dark feminine, which is coded in racist language, but definitely watch her video for more on how it specifically affects people with Black identities, Black women identities, but also queer people, right? I mean, trans people. Like if you are just coming into your gender presentation and, you know, presenting yourself as a woman in the world, you might be seeking out some style resources, some like coaching resources. And if you're getting those from cisgender women talking about how to be a woman, it's not real. I don't feel like a woman when I'm operating in my daily life. Like I was thinking about this in doing this episode, like when I'm alone home after I just worked or I just worked out and I'm like walking around the house wearing whatever. I could be wearing a crop top and low-rise sweatpants. I could be wearing shorts and a big t-shirt. I could have makeup on. I could not. Like when I'm alone, I don't feel like anything. I just feel like a human being with like emotions and like whatever. I'm not thinking about being perceived or like my gender or like my body and like my parts. Like I'm not thinking about any of that. Like I'm just existing. It's only when I go out into the world and I engage with other people that I'm like, oh, right. Like this is how I'm supposed to act as a woman, or this is how I'm supposed to act at this job, or like, you know, whatever it is. But at the same time, a lot of us, when we are alone, we're still dealing with anxieties and insecurities and struggles about like the phase of life that we're in, or the next phase of life that we're going into, or mental health issues or depression or whatever. Like I could be by myself and maybe something from work is like bothering me, or I just went through a heartbreak, or like whatever. You're going to seek out this type of content. Like I feel like I sound like a broken record. I've said it in a million different ways, but I understand why people are vulnerable to this content, and I don't want to hate on people for, you know, enjoying it or falling victim to it or whatever. I just think that we need to be very, very skeptical and hold, you know, influencers and creators accountable as well. Like maybe there is a femininity, divine feminine coach influencer that you really like that preaches these things. Maybe leave a comment and be like, ask a few more questions, you know, keep the conversation going, because I do think that there is something very valuable in women and femmes coming together and talking about what it means to be a woman. That's what feminism is supposed to be, right? Like us looking at, you know, these political structures and these power structures and talking amongst each other about like what we face and how to get over this and how to deal with this and how to operate in this society. And everyone is going to have different points of view. That's part of what keeps the discourse going. But at the same time, once it becomes kind of like eating yourself and destroying your true core being and just like appealing to these ideals, you know, speak softer, don't swear, dress modestly. It's like all of this stuff, like it is reductive to who you are as a human being. It's killing you more than it is helping you. And I think that that is a really fine line. There's some very high level advice about, you know, being in your creative energy, setting boundaries, building confidence that is really good for people at those vulnerable points in their life. But it's a fucking fine line. Like some women need to learn how to not be a pushover with a man. But also, what happens when you go full circle and then you get right back to being a complete pushover? Like it doesn't make any sense. But the last thing that I want to talk about is the movie The Love Witch, because this movie has reemerged in popularity recently. I've been seeing so many YouTube video essays about it, and one that I want to shout out is by the creator Lisa Fevrel, and she actually does like a 2-part series where she's talking about the Love Witch and fascism, and it's a really good video. I kind of low-key want to do a mini episode, maybe a full episode about the Love Witch. Let me know if you guys think that's something that you would be interested in. I did actually reach out to the creator of the Love Witch, the producer, director, costume designer, script writer. She literally did everything, Anna Biller, on Instagram, to see if she would let me interview her, because a lot of the research that I found online, she is a polarizing person. She has been accused of gender essentialism, TERF, SWERF, which is trans exclusionary radical feminist, or sex worker exclusionary radical feminist. And she is also married to Robert Greene, who wrote the 48 Laws of Power, which is one of the biggest self-help books in the fucking industry. Also a huge book that is a pipeline right to the red pill content into the manosphere, which we covered a little bit in our Gender Wars episode. So when I found that out, I was like, what the fuck? My mind is blown, because this movie is about self-help and femininity and divine femininity and the occult and witchiness and tarot and all of those things. So I do kind of want to do an episode about this. I don't know. Let me know if you guys think it's something that you would be interested in. I've also been like toying with the idea of starting a Patreon. So maybe that's something that I would release on Patreon. I don't know. We'll see. Let me know in the comments, but I do want to talk about it a little bit. So essentially the film follows a woman by the name of Elaine, who went through what seems like abusive relationship, and then her husband mysteriously dies, and so she joins this occult where she becomes a love witch, and she creates these potions so that men fall in love with her, but then the men fall in love with her and they become super emotional, and she doesn't like them anymore, so she throws them away. And then eventually, like, they're trying to catch her for like killing these men, and the cop, she falls in love with him, but then he doesn't fall in love with her back, and she ultimately like kills him. So it's really interesting, because again, when we're talking about the semiotics of everything, it can be interpreted in multiple different ways, and that's why I want to expand on it more in an episode, especially because Anna Biller seems to be such a confusing person with her marriage. I'm like, you can be, of course, married to someone with different opinions than her, and part of me was like, okay, she started dating Robert Greene before this movie was written and came out, so maybe in some way this is her like critique of the self-help industry in connection to what, like, I don't know. That's why I would really love to interview her. But essentially, while writing the script for the Love Witch, she had been reading self-help books, and one particular piece of advice that stuck out to her was that if a woman wants to keep a man around, she should love him less than he loves her. In an interview with Thrillist.com, she says, quote, "It was a book I was reading about women who love their men too much. It suggested that the reason a woman can't be in fulfilling relationships is that they bombard their man with so much love that it's almost a form of abuse. I just thought that was the most insane thing I'd ever read. So it's not that he's emotionally immature and closed and sexist and he cheats on you. It's that your love is so bad. I just thought, that's great. I'm going to make a movie about that. How a woman's love is so horrible it can actually kill a man." And yeah, I don't know what my takeaway from the movie was, because there were parts of the movie that I thought were incredible. I mean, the aesthetics are fucking beautiful, like look inspired by the Love Witch very much. But I also got glimpses of like a little bit of swerf in there. And I think that's what I would talk about if I did an episode about this. But it is, one reading of the movie is that Elaine takes up this occult practice that is led by a man under the guise of reappropriating some of these ideas about how women have been persecuted as witches. So, practice magic, reclaim these things, etc. But she only ends up like reinforcing them in a way because she's reinforcing gender ideals. Like, she throws these men away when they become too emotional, and she isn't even able to actually, like, her love magic doesn't even actually work because she's not able to make the man she actually loves like fall in love with her. But it is still a little bit gender essentialist in certain ways, like making the man overly emotional when he falls in love and things like that. And I just want to give you guys one quote before we wrap up with what we're wet, dry, and confused about, because it is okay to still be confused. So this quote is attributed to Jiddu Krishnamurti. Unconfirmed, the internet was a little bit iffy, but it is also a quote in a poem by Andrea Gibson called The Nutritionist. It is no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a sick society. All right, so let's wrap up. As for what I'm so wet about, guys, I am very wet about the book When God Was a Woman. Like I said, I was skeptical going into it because I feel like I've been just like generally skeptical about these binary masculine, feminine, what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to live life, like raising things up as a god. I don't have much faith in a higher power. But I don't think I was prepared for like how like rich the cultural like archaeological historical, like how many references there were and how much she really backed her shit up. I didn't know that histories. I was born in America, went through the American Catholic school system and the public education system where we don't talk that much about world history. But I really loved learning about ancient, world history and religion and seeing the roots of these matrilineal goddess worshiping cultures and how the Indo-Aryans invaded and the Levites and all of that stuff was really fucking like mind blowing to me, especially the connections to like Nazi Germany and fascism and how it connects today. Like that book really was revolutionary, I think, in expanding like my thought and how I interpret various points of culture and media. So I really, really highly suggest that book. I'm also still wet for general witchy spiritual stuff. Like I still like my sirens. I still like the god Eros and Psyche. There's still stuff that I pull. I mean, obviously I have the Virgin Mary. I keep this here more as a reminder of my patriarchal religious upbringing, and it inspires me to go against that versus like I'm actually worshiping her. But yeah, so I'm ultimately still like here for those things. As for dry, guys, I am generally dry about this self-help culture that we live in, the constant like need to improve yourself because we live in such a capitalistic society that's very individual, very focused on like efficiency and all of those things. It feels like there's always something wrong with you. And I talked about this a little bit in the last episode, but like the need to constantly improve something, like part of it is due to marketing. I work in marketing. I feel like an evil person, but it's, there's always something wrong with you. There's always something that you need to improve. Like that is how this society was built. And depending on your identity, there's even more that you need. There's even more quote unquote work that you need to do to be accepted or to gain success or to operate properly in today's culture. And I hate how vulnerable people are to that. I hate how vulnerable women are to that, queer people, black people, impoverished people, trans people. It just sucks because you want to learn about yourself and you do want to become like a quote unquote better person, but so many of the avenues to do that are like so toxic and will reinforce like bad beliefs about yourself. So unfortunately for me, like I think the best way that I do self-improvement style stuff is just researching and learning about history and like developing new ideologies and beliefs on my own, or turning to like queer theorists, feminist theorists, Black revolutionary thought theorists who are talking about like dismantling the society and like growing beyond it versus like growing within it. So I'm very dry about like that whole self-eating cycle of self-help. Obviously fucking dry about the fascism and Carl Jung. That really shook me. I always knew that there was like something a little bit off. Like, I've heard things about Freud, and like I've never really read his work or dove into him like too much, but like these things that we hold as truths that are so ingrained in the systemic like mental health culture and like therapy speak and like all of that stuff, like the roots of that, are riddled in misogyny and racism, and with Julius Evola, a lot of fascism with the divine feminine stuff. So you have to be very weary of that type of content, and that's a lot of personal responsibility when the education system is not funded or not promoting these types of things. Like I said, you don't really get like world history, world religion classes like anthropology, sociology, feminism, Black revolutionary thought, queer theory. all of those sorts of things in your public education system. Like, people are left up to what they learn on the internet, and that depends on your algorithm and what you seek out. So I challenge you to seek out, you know, alternative viewpoints and that are rooted in, you know, the history of these things. But I also am dry a little bit about, well, I guess, no, I'm actually, let me go back. I'm wet about the whole knowing about the semiotics thing, because I think that really, really helps in terms of media literacy. Like, I hope you guys like do some more like reading about that. Think a little bit more about like who's interpreting this thing for you. Like, when you have a TikToker break down the news of this like bill that was passed, or this legislative whatever, or this pop culture event, think about like, what is the person who is telling that perspective? And that's kind of what I was trying to do with the Anna Biller stuff on The Love Witch, right? And part of me feels like I can't even completely discuss the movie without knowing the artist's intentions, which it's like, can you separate the art from the artist? I don't know. That's a whole conversation, but I think it's a good thing to keep in mind. I could have a different takeaway from The Love Witch than what Anna Biller intended, and that is what art does. You know, it's meant to spark a discussion. It's meant to ignite something in you. But I think it's good to know, especially with history and mental health, psychology, all of those things, when you are hearing something from another person, consider their point of view, consider what they mean when they say tree, how you interpret tree, what the tree actually looked like. As for confused, this one is tricky because I'm really weary of like falling for the people that speak against the people that speak against talking about gender fluidity and how we need to remove the binary and all of that stuff. It's very rooted in gender essentialism, right? And it's very rooted in like, these are the masculine principles, these are the divine principles, all of that stuff. Like, I very much believe gender is fluid. Sex is one thing. Gender is your presentation. It's not real. It's made up. It is this fucking structure. However, I do feel like, and I've been feeling this more as I'm like getting older, I'm in my late 20s, like, and you know, people around me are like having kids and stuff like that, and thinking about things like childbirth, thinking about things like periods. Like, I had watched this TikTok of this woman that had been doing a bunch of research, and she's working on her thesis where she believes that the orgasm was like biologically, you know, created, designed so that women wouldn't feel as much pain during childbirth. She doesn't think that it was like created for sex. And there's something like very like beautiful about that. There's something like biological about that. There's something spiritual about that. Like, I don't know. The biology kind of trips me up sometimes, because I do feel like my hormones in many ways like run my life. Like, I'm a different person when I'm on my period and when I'm in my like luteal phase and follicular phase. I don't always pay attention to those things, but like, I have endometriosis. I've had polycystic ovaries in the past. I wasn't diagnosed with PCOS per se. I just had multiple cysts on both ovaries, which causes a lot of pain and a lot of like hormonal fluctuations and all of those things. But like, are hormones like the source of like why I feel more connected to the moon when I'm on my period, why my period always seems to line up with the cycles of the moon? You know, those sorts of things about being a cisgender woman that, I don't know, is it because like society has told me these things, like women are like water, they're intuitive, they have an inner knowing, like they're nurturing, and a lot of those things I don't identify with. Like, I've never considered myself to be like a very nurturing, motherly person at all. Like, in a lot of ways I relate to a lot more like masculine stuff than I do quote unquote feminine. But I think it's just more when it comes to things pertaining to the biology of like your menstrual cycle and birth, that feel divine in some ways. They feel spiritually huge, like creating life and your uterus like destroying itself every month. Like, it feels spiritual and it feels deeper, and I don't know where the place for that is, because I'm never ever of the belief that like you're not woman if you don't experience these things. Not at all. And I know plenty of trans women that are much more the feminine ideal than I am, as it pertains to beauty, as it pertains to emotions, as it pertains to how you carry yourself, how you speak, whatever. Like, all of that, like measuring yourself by the ideal, it just doesn't make sense to me. But I don't know where that has a place for things. And I think pertaining to sexuality as well, right? Like, is it nature or is it nurture with a lot of things? And I think it is nurture. Like, you know, we haven't been able to access our pleasure as much because it was like the original fucking sin, whereas men can. Like, men have the ability to move through life and play dumb about these things. Like, women have to do more emotional labor about these things. When Carl Jung says things like men are seen as logos and women are seen as eros, like, it makes sense because it's like so much of the emotional stuff has been ascribed to women and so much of the logical stuff has been ascribed to men. But like, a lot of times I feel way more logical than a lot of men or people who identify as masculine that I'm talking to. So like, I don't know, is it the structures, is it reinforcing it? Where is the space for the spiritual? I'm finding it really difficult for me to have any sort of spirituality at all right now because of the more I look at just like how fucked up our society is, and all these institutions of power. But yeah, at the same time, like, it's like I crave like connecting with a higher power or believing in an afterlife where like my grandpa and Tracy are like happily looking down on me and like with me every single day. But it's so muddled in just all this bullshit that I'm like, I don't know, do we need to be spiritual? Do we not? How do you guys deal with this? Please comment and let me know like what you think about all this stuff. Now that we know, you know, the roots of a lot of this polarity thinking in terms of like feminine and masculine and divinity and like sacredness and all of that stuff, where do you sit with your spirituality? How do you connect with your energy? Do you even have to label it as feminine? How do you connect with your biology? And I know that's a very triggering question for some people. So like, these are just weird things to talk about because we live in such a polarized society. And I never want to say the wrong thing or like offend someone because that is like the opposite of the place that I'm coming from. And I hope you guys educate me too. If there's anything that I said in this episode that is not, you know, understanding of like trans women or trans people or non-binary people or gender fluid people, like, please comment, educate me, let me know. I'm learning alongside of all of you guys. That's why I do this stuff, so that I can learn as well. But yeah, that about does it for this episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. If you like this video, you can follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts. Rate me on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, 5 stars. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts as well. Follow on Instagram at SoWhatSoDry. The O's are zeros. I'm starting a Substack at SoWhatSoDry as well. Again, Patreon hopefully in the future. Next episode will be about mental health and sexuality. And let me know about that Love Witch episode, still thinking about it. And yeah, I love you guys so fucking much. I will catch you in the next episode. Bye!